if you're looking for great new comic books, it's getting harder and harder at DC and Marvel. It's just not a good era right now when it comes to creativity. You really got to go to the independent comic book scene. And even there's not a lot of original ideas or original stuff happening there. Like, I personally think that Energon is great, but that's Transformers and G.I. Joe. I think Nottingham is a lot of fun, but that's basically Robin Hood. I really like TMNT Saturday Morning Adventures. Great book. It's TMNT. I really like Dawn Runner. It's basically Pacific Rim. So there's not a whole lot of people out there coming up with really new original concepts. One of those publishers is Ghost Machine, Geoff Johns and Peter J. Tomasi and Jason Fabok and Gary Frank and Brian Hitch and Ivan Reis, and just a slew of really good, awesome comic book creators are actually doing some original stuff over on Ghost Machine. Not a lot of people are talking about it for some reason. They've got the 3 new series out, all written by Geoff Johns. You got Geiger, that's been out for kind of a while, and it felt like it kind of hit a rut. Once they discovered the fate of his family, there was nowhere left to go with the character. But now that they've introduced this new Atomic Knight guy, it's really spruced up the cast and made the book a lot better, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm enjoying it. And the character Redcoat, which is Geoff Johns and Brian Hitch, is really starting to grow on me. He's basically immortal. Well, he's not immortal. He can actually die, but he always resurrects or whatever in the end because he's had something happen to him. Much more of like an anti-hero, an unwilling hero. I am starting to find him more and more funny as the issues go along. But the one series that really stands out for me that's absolutely awesome is Rook Exodus, also written by Geoff Johns, with Jason Fabok on art. And while the idea of a survival game or survival story on a dystopian planet certainly isn't the most original idea in the world, the way they're doing it is actually pretty original. It's actually really, really cool. And this is a series I think everyone should be talking about. We're 2 issues in. If you've missed out, or maybe you just want to talk about how awesome it is, that's what I'm going to go in here today. I'm not going to go and spoil all the big stuff that's happened so far, because we've certainly seen some very big events within the first 2 issues of Rook Exodus. But I will tell you why I think this is a really, really cool concept and why people should be jumping on the Rook Exodus bandwagon. Now, we know a lot of original concepts, even if they're good, they do take a long time to really get going and gain popularity. The Walking Dead, an enormous franchise, started out not exactly selling like gangbusters, but over time with good word of mouth and longevity being there every single month for months on end, people realized it was a good book. They invested in it. Hopefully, Ghost Machine does have that kind of staying power where they don't just go, you know what? It's not doing quite as well as we liked. Let's try another direction and just start canceling stuff and restarting and doing this and that and not focusing on a good idea, because Rook Exodus is a very good idea. And the big change to this, survival game on a dystopian kind of dying planet or whatever is the incorporation of the Wardens. And Wardens are people that have been brought in, and they have special helmets that allow them to contact and kind of control to a degree the wildlife from Earth that has been incorporated into the environment on the planet Exodus, which has been terraformed. And that's basically the concept of what Rook is, Rook being the title character, Exodus being the planet. So I'm going to go into why I think this is a really strong series, why I think it's worth your time and money, and why hopefully this has a really long run in it, because there's a lot of cool stuff going on here, and we just don't get original ideas anymore. Go read Amazing Spider-Man 50. It's a weird amalgamation of the stuff going on within Chip Zdarsky's Batman run, as well as Josh Williamson's Superman Brainiac stuff. He's just combining ideas that are being used in other stories. I like original concepts, and Rook Exodus is certainly the best one in my estimation to come out on the indie scene in a couple of years at least. The first thing that really just pops your eye on the book, of course, is the art from Jason Fabok. Jason Fabok is an absolutely phenomenal comic book artist. And it's really the designs of the Wardens themselves. The helmets that they use have characteristics similar to what the animals that the Wardens themselves are controlling. The 2 designs that I think are the best so far are Swine. And he's basically a Warden that's able to control pigs and warthogs and beasts like that. And he's got a badass design, easily the best one in my estimation. I kind of wish he was the main character. I think the Dire Wolf design is also really, really cool. It's sleek, it looks badass, but it's also sexy at the same time and really highlights what a cool character that is. And certainly even the one that I think is maybe the least interesting of the 3 main ones that we've seen so far, Rook, is still really, really cool. And as you can see, Rook is controlling crows. I don't think he can control all bird life. I think he's specifically down to that species. If it's a type of crow, he can control it. And then obviously Direwolf has a pack of wolves that they're controlling here. And another thing that I really like that Ghost Machine did when they did that Ghost Machine #1, which are just little previews of all the characters and stories that they're going to be doing, they did really cool character cards, highlighting the awesome designs from Jason Fabok, but also letting you get to know who the characters are, what their capabilities are, where they came from, fleshing out the characters in a very familiar way. I love these kind of cards. I always have enjoyed stuff like this, so I thought that was a real highlight on Ghost Machine #1. When we get into Rook Exodus itself, the big thing is the setting, the planet of Exodus. And what has happened here is there's a private company, and apparently Earth was getting overcrowded and overpolluted. We've certainly seen this song and dance in comic books and movies and video games and everywhere. This company decided they were going to create their own planet and terraform it, and they needed to bring wardens along to help control the wildlife. And apparently the wildlife that was introduced into this planet Exodus was also genetically modified. We're not exactly sure how that has happened, but what we definitely know has happened on Exodus is that the terraforming or the world engines, they have another name for it, but it's a world engine. It's basically meant to terraform the planet, but the world engines themselves broke. The environment started breaking down, became less hospitable to human beings, and the people that had paid their way to get there through the private company and had the means to leave, they all exited the planet. They all left on their starships, and basically the employees of the company, specifically the wardens in this case, were left behind to fend for themselves and were told, we will return for you, but we got to get out of here now and get the paying customers out. And one of the things that's happened as a result of the breaking down of the terraforming on the planet and the genetic modification of the animals that were introduced to the environment is that they are growing wildly out of control. So you will see enormous, insane versions of animals that you would see on this planet. In this case is an enormous snapping turtle, which is absolutely badass. And the action is really, really cool. It's Jason Fabok. This is something that you would imagine he would excel at. So that's kind of the setting itself, what Exodus is, why everyone left, why the wardens are still there, and why the planet itself has become so inhospitable, not just because the world engines are breaking down, but because the animal life itself are actually going out of control. Now, obviously, you don't want to stay on a planet like this, and Rook himself has come up with a plan. His plan is that he is going to build a rocket. Now, if you want to know about Rook, he is actually a farmer, and we'll get a little bit more into that here in a minute. So how he knows how to actually build a rocket from the remaining technology that's left on the planet, I'm not really sure. I imagine at some point we will probably get some revelations on that. But he's basically been scavenging for months at this point as the rations and available food that was left behind is running out to build his own rocket so they can escape the planet Exodus before it becomes completely unhospitable to human life forms whatsoever. There are some other wardens out there that he's in contact with. Swine is his best friend. And basically that's their plan together. Swine has been helping him find these parts as they try to assemble this rocket to escape the planet Exodus. There's another warden out there. Her name is Direwolf. Apparently her and her father were part of like the recruiting team that went out and found the farmers and the people that weren't doing well on Earth and brought them to this planet and trained them up to be wardens. She doesn't think they should leave. She actually believes that this private company that said, we will return for you, will in fact return for the people that they left behind. I don't know why she believes that. It seems pretty stupid, but it is mentioned quite specifically that she is a company man and likely does believe in the company and themselves, that they will return for them. But she has another plan as well, that even if they don't return, they will in fact be able to restore the world engines themselves or somehow make the environment on Exodus compatible with human life, and they can stay there and salvage this planet that they've all invested so much of themselves into. So those are the plans. We got to escape, we got to wait for rescue, or we have to fix the planet itself. I will say in the very opening pages of Rook Exodus #1, we see that escaping by homemade rocket might not be the safest, smartest plan in the world. It does not work out well at all for some random characters that die at the very beginning. That escaping via homemade rocket, probably pretty darn dangerous. But they are left with very few choices at this point, because even if the help does come back, it's likely not going to be in time because things are breaking down very quickly. The main character himself is Rook. He's an interesting enough character. He used to be a farmer on the planet Earth, and they kind of show you what happened to him the relationship that he had with his father and the farm itself, and why he held it so dear to him, and why eventually he did decide to leave the farm and join up with this private company that was terraforming this planet Exodus to become a warden. He basically needed an opportunity. Earth was not going to be working out well for him, and he's alone. He does have his best friend, but they do not hang out all that often. He's running out of rations. And also we find out that the helmets themselves, a little bit of the natural instincts of whatever beast you're controlling starts to creep into your mind. Even when he takes the helmet off, he can still feel like what the birds are feeling or what they would do in a certain situation. And it's kind of creeping in on him. And the only way that he can get those instincts kind of out of his mind is to drink them out. So he is also a heavy drinker. You can see that he's heavily scarred. And he's a man with very, very few friends and fewer options at this point. Stranded on this dying planet, connected to a bunch of birds that are probably eventually going to make him insane anyway. It is certainly hinted at that there are more wardens out there, and you would imagine there would be. I don't think there's probably only bears and wolves and swine and crows on this planet. And there is also another plan to get with the other wardens and see what's going on there. I cannot wait for that because the designs themselves are so badass and cool that I want to see what the other wardens look like and how they've kind of adapted themselves into the planet Exodus, but also incorporated some of the natural instincts of the animals that they're controlling into their day-to-day looks. Like, I think that's one of the coolest things about the entire thing. I would love to play with a freaking swine action figure with my kids. I think they would lose their little minds. Now, obviously, you do need a villain in a comic book, and certainly the planet Exodus itself is a villain. And you could even say that giant snapping turtle would be a pretty good villain. But we do have another warden out there. I mentioned bears, and he is in charge of the bears on this planet. And I also mentioned that the animals are growing out of control. And this was just a great page when they show this other warden out there that is trying to wipe out all the other wardens that's in charge of all the bears. Like, it's just badass. Look at the size of those guys. And they've got like mechanical saddles with guys on top of them riding them, but they're so enormous you can't even see the guys in the cockpits or whatever. And it's a really cool visual. And this dude is very, very dangerous. And it's also hinted that he might not have been a warden in the past. In fact, there might have been some illegal like human experiments going on Exodus where this guy came from. And he is very, very dangerous. He also has a just badass look upon him. And just everything about this villain just screams deadly. And everything about this art just screams badass. But he is the final boss that we've seen so far. He's the big obstacle to overcome. And he's got, what are they, 50-foot tall bears at this point, which I imagine are quite intimidating on this planet Exodus. And as you can tell, I'm really, really excited about this series. The second issue came out this week. If you haven't checked out Rook Exodus from Geoff Johns and Jason Fabok, and you're looking for something original, something with badass art, and something that isn't the same thing you've read a billion times over again, this is the book that you need to go check out. This is the thing that you need to discover this week. Because this thing, while not having a ton of buzz for reasons I cannot figure out, is absolutely spectacular and badass. It really does work on every single level. The characters are cool. The mysteries are intriguing. The setting itself is badass. The designs are awesome. The art is just off the fucking chain from Jason Fabok. And when you're a comic book reader, this is the kind of stuff that you want to discover. This is what gives you that comic book stiffy that I don't talk about nearly as much as I would like to, because there aren't a lot of great new ideas going on right now. So I do hope people support this one, because we want the good stuff to survive. We want the publishers to realize if you do cool stuff with really cool creators, comic book fans will actually notice and actually show up. Do I think this thing's going to blow up and be as popular as Energon Universe? Certainly not in the beginning stages. You know, Ghost Machine does have to build up its fan base. You do have fans that come along with Geoff Johns and Gary Frank and Brian Hitch and Jason Fabok and Peter J. Tomasi and Ivan Reis and a slew of other really awesome comic book creators that are part of Ghost Machine, but they still have to create their reputation, because these are unknown characters. These are unknown IPs. These are unknown concepts, unproven concepts at this point. But I do think they've got the right mix. And basically all three of the Ghost Machine titles that are out right now, I would recommend. I think you will like them. They're all wonderfully illustrated, well written. But I do think Rook Exodus is the big fucking winner out of all these ones. And it's a lot of fun. It's badass. It's intense. And there's some pretty crazy stuff going on in this series. I didn't want to spoil it because I do want people to go out there and check it out and discover for themselves why Rook Exodus is so badass and why they should be reading this thing every single time it comes out. If you're interested in discovering more hidden gems throughout the comic book industry, I do want to remind you there's lots more stuff going over on Thinking Critical Patreon. If you like what we're doing here, talking about the comic book industry, being very honest about it, and you want to back us over on Patreon, we give you lots of awesome podcasts. The Hot or Not podcast with Jim from Weird Science. We cover all the important Marvel stuff and DC stuff, but we also cover tons of indie comic books, trying to discover those hidden gems that are going to get us through these very, very dark times in mainstream comic books. And this is the kind of stuff that you will find there that we're talking about every single week on Patreon. There's a link in the video description.